For the record, I am Deputy Jamal Porter with the Sheriff's Office. This is a county-issued vehicle. I do not consent to a search of this SUV.
For our safety, we're going to make sure there's nothing in this vehicle that can hurt anybody.
You haven't run the plate.
Well, we'll sort all that out afterwards. Right now, we're clearing the vehicle.
Did you run the plate on this vehicle before you put your hands on my deputy and his SUV?
Ma'am, we intended to verify after we...
That's a yes or no question, officer.
No, ma'am.
So to be clear for the record, you detained a deputy sheriff and searched a county vehicle without consent, without verification, and without probable cause.
The county-issued Ford Explorer sat on the shoulder like it had been abandoned, hazard lights blinking against a flat, beige horizon. 2 city patrol cars boxed it in from behind at an angle that screamed felony stop, not traffic stop. Deputy Jamal Porter stood beside his driver's door with his palms open and visible, elbows locked, shoulders still. He kept his voice steady while he explained again that he was law enforcement, that his duty ID was on him, that the SUV was county property and marked as such. The officers did not slow down. One of them moved in close, crowding Porter's space. The other scanned the cabin like he expected a gun to rise out of the center console. Their hands hovered near their belts, their posture rigid, their tone sharp. They ordered Porter away from the door. Porter complied, stepping back exactly as instructed, careful and deliberate. Then the escalation crossed a line. One officer seized Porter's arm and pivoted him toward the rear quarter panel, guiding him with pressure instead of words. Porter did not resist. He did not flinch. He kept his hands high and let the officer place him where he wanted, even as passing drivers slowed and phones appeared in windows. A woman in an SUV rolled by at a crawl, camera pointed. A pickup on the far lane drifted to get a better angle. The officers noticed, but it didn't change their rhythm. If anything, it tightened it. Porter tried one more time to direct them towards the county identifiers they were ignoring. The agency markings on the rear hatch, the government fleet tags, the internal equipment that didn't belong to a civilian driver. The officers kept treating it like a story. They ordered him to stay put. They told him they were going to search the vehicle. Porter stated calmly and clearly that he did not consent and that they needed a lawful basis. They answered by moving anyway. And in that moment, out on that quiet stretch of Pima County Highway, the power chess game was already being filmed from 3 different angles. Quick thing, tell where you're watching from in the comments. City, state, or country. And if you're into stories where accountability catches up to people who skip procedure, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, rewind because this didn't start like a viral incident. It started like a normal drive until assumptions replaced protocol. Earlier that afternoon, Porter had been doing what he'd done for 14 years, moving through a routine assignment with quiet efficiency. He wasn't chasing attention. He wasn't looking for conflict. He had a county schedule to follow and paperwork to deliver, an ordinary chain of tasks that meant miles on the highway and minutes that mattered. The Explorer wasn't subtle. It carried county fleet markings. It carried the kind of wear that came from real work. Inside were the tools of a deputy's day, a vest secured in the back, a hard case for issued gear, and a folder of assignments that had been printed, stamped, and filed the way government offices still did it when they needed accountability and a paper trail. Porter drove the speed limit. He wasn't weaving. He wasn't riding anyone's bumper. He was just a black man in the driver's seat of an SUV that looked official, unless you decided it couldn't be. 2 Tucson City Patrol officers saw him from the opposite direction, turned around and tucked in behind him. At first, it looked like a standard follow. Then the distance closed. Then the lights came on. Porter did what he trained civilians to do during stops. He signaled, moved to the shoulder with plenty of room, and stopped in a controlled way. He lowered the window. He kept his hands where they could be seen. He waited. The first officer approached fast and tight, not wide and cautious. He didn't start with a clear explanation. He started with control, commands, not context. His partner hung back, angled toward the passenger side, scanning. Porter responded the way a professional responded when he knew the stakes of misunderstanding. He identified himself. He indicated he was a deputy. He made it clear he had agency identification and could produce it. The officers did not do the most basic thing that would have prevented what came next. They did not verify what they were looking at before they treated it like a threat. No audible plate check. No pause to confirm the vehicle belonged to the county. No radio call that matched the intensity of their posture. It was the kind of shortcut that only happened when someone decided they already knew the answer. The first officer demanded driver documents. Porter moved slowly, narrating his movements the way trained people did when they wanted everyone to go home safe. He told them where his wallet was. He offered his duty ID. He tried to bridge the gap between what they assumed and what was true. The first officer rejected the bridge. In his body language, the message was simple. The identification Porter offered didn't count yet. Not because it wasn't valid, because it didn't fit the story the officer had already written. The second officer stepped closer and asked questions that didn't align with the traffic stop. He asked who the vehicle belonged to in a way that suggested the answer was already suspicious. He asked where Porter got it, as if county fleet departments handed out explorers like rental cars. Porter remained calm. He repeated the facts without raising his voice. He pointed out the markings. He referenced the agency. He told them there was paperwork inside that matched the vehicle and the assignment. The first officer interpreted composure as defiance. That was the oldest trick in street encounters. Turning calm into attitude, turning explanation into argument, turning a professional boundary into a reason to escalate. The order came to step out. Porter complied immediately. He opened the door slowly, stepped out, and closed it. He kept his hands visible. He turned his body slightly so no one could claim he moved suddenly. Even then, the officers kept pushing for dominance, not clarity. They repositioned him. They told him to face away. They instructed him to keep distance from the vehicle as if the SUV itself was a weapon. Porter understood the trap. If he protested, they could label him non-compliant. If he moved too quickly, they could claim fear. If he spoke too firmly, they could say he was aggressive. So he did the only thing that had ever protected people in moments like this. He stayed precise. He stated he was a deputy. He stated again that the vehicle was county issued. He stated that he did not consent to a search. The officers moved into the search anyway. And this was where the stop changed from questionable to dangerous. Not because Porter did anything wrong, but because the officers were now creating a justification in real time. They peered through windows. They tugged at the driver's handle. One of them leaned in and began scanning compartments. The other kept Porter positioned like a detainee, hand on his arm, body angled to block him from seeing too much. Porter watched the road, not the officers. That was how you stayed calm. You anchored on something neutral. The desert wind moved dust across the shoulder. Traffic hissed past in waves, and now more drivers were slowing. The officers noticed the cameras and did what people did when they realized they might have an audience. They became louder about how lawful they were being, even as they skipped the steps that proved it. Porter tried to keep the record clean. He clarified in a controlled tone that he was not resisting. He clarified he was cooperating. He clarified he did not consent. He made sure each piece of his compliance was visible and understandable, for the same reason civilians repeated themselves on Bodycam, because later, somebody would try to rewrite it. The first officer walked to the rear hatch and reached for it like he owned it. This was the moment where the entire stop balanced on a hinge, because in the back of that county SUV, behind a locked case and a neatly stacked folder, was the truth they could have confirmed in 60 seconds with a plate check, a radio call, or basic professional humility. The first officer opened the rear case. Inside was a county-issued vest with clear inventory markings. Next to it was a folder of assignments, stamped with the sheriff's office seal. The officers paused. Their confidence dropped. What Porter had been saying from the start was now in their hands. Porter stayed still and kept his hands visible. He repeated that he was a deputy and that they could verify his identity immediately. He restated that he did not consent to the search. The first officer shifted into damage control. He started explaining his actions as safety, while avoiding the simple fact that they had not verified plates or agency ownership first. The second officer looked toward traffic. Phones were up. The stop was being filmed. The first officer asked for Porter's ID again. Porter provided it slowly and clearly. The second officer checked it, then radioed for a supervisor. While they waited, the search stopped expanding. The physical pressure on Porter eased, but they kept him positioned away from the vehicle, as if they could still frame the stop as justified. A sheriff's unit arrived. Captain Elena Vargas stepped out and recognized Porter immediately. She checked him quickly, then turned to the city officers and demanded their basis for the stop and search. They offered broad explanations. Vargas narrowed it to procedure. She confirmed they had not run a plate check before escalating. She confirmed they had not verified the county vehicle markings or Porter's ID before going hands-on. She confirmed they searched without consent and without a clear lawful basis. With cameras still recording, Vargas called Internal Affairs to respond to the scene. When IA arrived, Vargas summarized the facts on the shoulder. No clear reason stated, no verification before escalation, physical handling, and a non-consensual search that only ended after official sheriff's gear and paperwork were found. Then she made the consequence immediate. She ordered both officers detained pending investigation and had them placed in cuffs on scene. Porter remained composed. Vargas told him he had every right to file a formal complaint, and she treated it as misconduct, not confusion. The scene ended the way it should have started, with verification and paperwork. Internal Affairs documented everything on the shoulder. They collected the officers' names, badge numbers, and unit information. They noted the lack of a stated reason for the stop, the missed plate verification, the physical handling, and the non-consensual search. Porter gave a brief, factual statement. He listed the sequence. He identified himself early, offered duty ID, pointed out county markings, complied with instructions, and stated non-consent before the search. He kept it professional and complete. Captain Vargas ensured Porter was able to leave safely and that the county vehicle and equipment were accounted for. She also ensured bystander recordings were treated as evidence, not ignored. Within days, the incident spread online through short clips filmed by passing drivers. The public focus stayed on the same point. Escalation happened before verification. Porter filed a formal complaint. He requested dispatch logs, radio traffic, and any body camera footage. He documented the time, location, and the officer's actions in a standard report format. The investigation moved fast because the record was strong. Internal Affairs compared the timeline against CAD entries, radio calls, and video. The key procedural failures were clear. No plate check before escalation, no proper identification verification before going hands-on, and a search without consent or clear lawful basis. Both city officers were placed on administrative leave pending findings. Agency leadership held review meetings focused on interagency conduct and stop procedures. Training and supervision were flagged as part of the review, not just individual behavior. By the end of the initial review phase, the case was no longer treated as a misunderstanding. It was treated as misconduct, supported by video and documentation. Internal Affairs completed the formal review using the full record, dispatch logs, radio traffic, body camera where available, and multiple bystander videos. The findings focused on sequence and legality. The officers escalated before verification, used physical control without a clear basis, and searched a county vehicle without consent or documented cause. The review noted that basic steps, plate check, and identity confirmation were available and ignored. The city placed both officers on restricted status while discipline moved forward. Their reports were compared to video and audio. The inconsistencies became part of the case, not a side issue. Captain Vargas submitted a separate supervisory memorandum through the sheriff's chain. It documented the operational risk of interagency stops handled without verification and flagged it as misconduct, not a training mistake. Porter met with county leadership and filed a full written statement for the record. He also requested preservation of all related footage and communications to prevent loss or deletion under routine retention. The city issued an internal notice reminding patrol units of required verification steps on stops involving government fleet vehicles and cross-agency personnel. Supervisors were directed to review stops that escalated without an initial plate check. Porter's complaint triggered a joint review between the city and county. They examined jurisdiction boundaries on that highway stretch, dispatch coordination, and how city units handled county fleet identifiers. The goal was to prevent the same failure chain from repeating. As the case moved beyond internal review, Porter was given formal options: continue only through administrative discipline, or pursue additional action through professional standards and legal channels. He chose to keep everything documented and handled through process, not public argument. By the time the first disciplinary decisions were drafted, the core point was locked in. The stop became a problem because procedure was skipped, and it stayed a problem because the officers tried to control the scene instead of confirming the facts. The disciplinary decisions were based on the same issue every reviewer kept returning to. The officers acted first and verified later. Internal Affairs recommended sustained findings on multiple violations tied to the stop: failure to establish and communicate a lawful reason, failure to verify plates and vehicle ownership before escalation, improper detention tactics, and an unlawful search without consent or documented cause. City command staff approved discipline. The officers were removed from patrol during the process. One was flagged for termination-level misconduct based on the total chain of decisions and the mismatch between report language and recorded video. The other faced severe suspension and mandatory retraining with a final warning status because their actions followed the same escalation path. Because the incident involved interagency harm and public exposure, the case also triggered a risk review. The city's legal office and the county's risk management unit opened a parallel track to assess liability. Porter was offered a formal route to seek remedy for the stop itself, not only the internal discipline. Porter kept his response procedural. He provided documentation, preserved records, and avoided public arguments. He returned to duty once the county confirmed he had acted correctly throughout, and that the stop created no performance concerns. The sheriff's office issued an internal bulletin using the incident as a training reference. It emphasized 3 points: verification first, de-escalation as default, and immediate supervisor notification when a stop involves government fleet vehicles or cross-agency personnel. The city updated field guidance for patrol. Supervisors were directed to audit stops that escalated without an initial plate check. Officers were required to document verification steps in reports when government vehicles were involved. Joint dispatch coordination on that highway stretch was tightened to reduce jurisdiction confusion. The public response shifted over time from outrage to expectation. People focused less on the viral clip and more on whether consequences matched the conduct. The visible on-scene detention and the later discipline made it harder for the incident to be minimized. For Porter, the change was quieter. He did not frame it as a personal victory. He treated it as a warning about how fast a stop could turn when assumptions replaced procedure, and how important it was to keep the record clean from the first second. Months later, the incident had a paper trail as solid as the video. Porter's complaint closed with sustained findings and documented corrective action. The city's final discipline became part of the officers' internal history and affected their future assignments supervision level, and eligibility for specialized units. The county and city also finalized operational changes tied directly to what failed that day. Dispatch coordination on that highway corridor was updated. Patrol guidance required plate verification before escalation when the vehicle was not clearly linked to a crime. Supervisors were instructed to respond early when a stop involved government fleet markings or cross-agency personnel. Training was updated with the same sequence the investigation highlighted. Verify first, then decide. Officers were required to document the verification steps in reports, not just the outcome. Body camera review standards were tightened for stops that included hands-on control or searches. Porter did not become a public face of the incident. He kept working. But inside the sheriff's office, the stop became a reference point for younger deputies. Proof that staying calm and keeping the record clean could protect you when someone else tried to control the narrative. The last change was personal. Porter adjusted his habits, even though he had done nothing wrong. He made sure his credentials were always positioned for quick display. He ensured the county fleet identifiers were unobstructed. He treated every stop as if it could become evidence, because he had lived what happened when procedure got replaced by assumption. The incident left a clear lesson behind. Authority without verification creates risk, and cameras don't create truth. They preserve it. If you've ever been in a situation where someone judged you before they checked the facts, what did you do? Did you stay calm, or did it pull you into the argument? Drop your take in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more story times where accountability actually shows up.
Nothing you've said so far convinces me this is really your vehicle, sir.
If you believe there's a legitimate alert, you can run the plate or verify the VIN. I've told you I do not consent to a search. These are my judicial credentials.
You're a judge?
I am, and my rights were the same 5 minutes ago as they are right now.
The luxury SUV had barely settled into the hotel's valet lane when the patrol car cut across the front like a gate swinging shut. A second later, another unit slid in behind, close enough that the judge could see the reflection of its grille in his rearview mirror. The lane became a trap. Curb on one side, concrete planter on the other, two police vehicles boxing him in like they had practiced it. The officer who stepped out moved fast. He approached the driver's door with a hard stance and a hand hovering near his belt, eyes fixed on the badgeless windshield and the polished SUV like it offended him. He told the driver the vehicle matched a stolen vehicle alert. He said the driver needed to step out immediately. He pushed for a search right there in the valet lane, like consent was a formality. Inside the SUV, Judge Darius Whitfield stayed seated. He kept his hands visible near the steering wheel, window down, voice controlled. He asked what the legal basis was. He asked whether he was being detained. He refused a search that wasn't supported by probable cause or a warrant. And he asked, again, for a supervisor. The officer didn't ease up. He repeated the stolen vehicle claim. He leaned in slightly, using the angle of his body to make the moment feel smaller, tighter, private, even though it wasn't, because by then it already had an audience. A valet in a black vest had stopped mid-step, key fob in hand, staring. A couple in conference lanyards turned their phones toward the lane. A guest near the revolving doors raised their camera higher, framing the patrol car, the SUV, and the officer's posture, like a scene they didn't trust anyone to summarize later. And the officer, he noticed the cameras. He just didn't respect them. He talked louder. He acted like the driver was being difficult. He hinted that cooperation would make this easier and that refusal would make it worse. He treated the SUV like evidence before he treated the man inside like a citizen. The man inside wasn't just any citizen. He was a superior court judge, and he knew exactly how quickly a routine stop turned into a headline when ego outran law. Now, real quick, tell everybody where you're watching from. Country, state, city. Drop it in the comments. And if you watch these stories because you care about dignity, rights, and accountability in real life, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because what happened in that valley lane wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. It was a live demonstration of how profiling worked in 2025. A pretext, a posture, a demand for compliance, and a gamble that the person being targeted would either panic or hand over their rights to end the tension. Judge Whitfield didn't panic. He didn't hand over anything. And the worst part for the officer was that the judge didn't even raise his voice. The cameras kept rolling, and the footage didn't need commentary to tell the truth. It had started less than 10 minutes earlier, the way most days started for someone who lived by calendars and deadlines. Judge Whitfield had been driving downtown to pick up a colleague, Judge Keisha Monroe, for a legal conference across town. They were both scheduled for the same panel, the kind filled with attorneys, judges, and academics, talking about modern policing, courtroom ethics, and what constitutional rights looked like outside a textbook. It was midday. The hotel was busy in the way downtown hotels always were. Valley whistles, luggage wheels, ride shares, double parking for just 1 second. Conference attendees drifting in clusters with coffee cups and name badges. Whitfield pulled into the drop-off lane like he had done 100 times in 100 places. He didn't cut anyone off. He didn't speed. He didn't roll through a stop sign. He was simply a black man in a high-end SUV arriving at a downtown hotel. That detail mattered, because the officer who boxed him in hadn't come from nowhere. He had been sitting a block away, angled toward traffic, watching the flow of vehicles that belonged to people going somewhere important. When Whitfield's SUV passed, the officer moved, not like someone responding to a confirmed alert, not like someone checking a plate and waiting for confirmation, like someone who had already decided the story in his head and needed the real world to catch up. He followed into the valet lane. He didn't pause to let the valet staff manage the flow. He didn't choose a safe, open spot. He didn't approach like this was uncertain. He chose the box in. To most people, that tactic felt like a statement. You're not going anywhere because I say you're not going anywhere. To Judge Whitfield, it felt like a legal argument happening without a courtroom, where tone was used as evidence and compliance was treated like guilt. He didn't give the officer the reaction he wanted. He stayed in the seat. He kept his hands visible. He didn't rummage for anything. He didn't reach across the console. He didn't step out just because someone with a badge demanded it. He did what experienced attorneys always told people to do, but rarely got to model in real time. He made the officer articulate the reason. The officer didn't like that. So he leaned on a familiar pressure sequence, the kind that worked when the other person was alone and scared. First came the certainty. The vehicle matched a stolen alert. Then came the urgency. The driver needed to step out right now. Then came the implication. If the driver had nothing to hide, he would cooperate. Whitfield held his line. He asked for a supervisor. He refused consent to a search. He asked if he was free to leave. That was the chess move, because once he asked that question, the officer had two options: establish lawful grounds to detain him or back down. The officer chose a third option. He escalated the performance. He widened his stance. He angled his shoulders toward the growing crowd like he wanted an audience on his side. He used the valet lane's chaos to make Whitfield look like the problem holding everything up. But the valet lane wasn't a private street corner. It was a glass-fronted hotel entrance in the middle of the day, and the people watching weren't relying on memory. They were recording. One valet, Jasmine, the lead on shift, lifted her phone and held it steady, not shaky, not emotional, just documenting. A guest near the entrance framed the whole scene from farther back, catching both patrol cars and the SUV, so nobody could later claim there was room to just pull forward. Someone inside the lobby started filming through the glass, capturing the officer's approach from an angle that showed his hand placement, his proximity, his body language. Multiple angles, multiple witnesses, one story. Judge Whitfield knew that the second phones came out. The encounter changed. The officer knew it too. But instead of adjusting, the officer doubled down, because backing down in public felt, to him, like losing. And right there, with cameras rolling and valet staff frozen in place, he let the real message creep through the official one. It wasn't only about a stolen vehicle alert. It was about disbelief. The officer's tone, his emphasis, his stare, the way he kept looking at the SUV and then back at Whitfield, made it clear he didn't believe the man inside belonged behind that wheel. And when Whitfield calmly held his boundary and repeated his request for a supervisor, the officer's patience thinned in front of everyone. The valet lane quieted in that specific way it did when strangers sensed a moment turning, when people stopped pretending not to watch, because everyone could feel it. The officer was about to decide whether this stayed a stop or became a spectacle. And Judge Whitfield was about to decide whether he ended it with paperwork or ended it with proof. The officer tried to break the moment by controlling the smallest things first. He told Judge Whitfield to turn the engine off. He told him to hand over the keys. He told him to step out so they could clear it up. Each instruction was delivered like it was already law, like the badge itself created permission. Whitfield didn't play tug of war with commands. He stayed focused on one lane of facts. He asked if he was being detained. He asked what specific information tied his vehicle to a theft beyond a vague match. He repeated that he did not consent to a search. And he requested a supervisor again, calmly like a metronome. That calm did something that anger never could. It exposed the officer's lack of foundation. Because if the alert was real and specific, the officer could name it, verify it, and proceed by the book. Instead, he leaned into pressure, tone, proximity, speed. He tried to make Whitfield feel like the only way out was obedience. In the valet lane, phones stayed up. Jasmine didn't move. She kept her camera steady at chest height, catching clean audio in the officer's stance. A guest near the doors angled wide to include both patrol cars, the boxed-in SUV, and the line of waiting vehicles stacking behind them. Someone else stepped to the side to capture Whitfield's hands through the open window, visible the whole time. No sudden movements, no reaching. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. And procedural footage was exactly what departments feared, because it didn't depend on opinion. The officer switched tactics. He started talking like he was doing Whitfield a favor. He implied that if Whitfield just cooperated, the whole thing would be over in minutes. He framed refusal as suspicious. He tried to turn the crowd into a jury, making it seem like Whitfield was causing a scene by insisting on rights. But the scene already belonged to the officer. He had created it the moment he chose the box-in at a hotel entrance. Whitfield stayed inside the SUV and did the one thing that always made a bluff expensive. He made the officer commit to specifics. He asked whether the officer had run the plate. He asked whether the officer had verified the VIN. He asked for the supervisor's name once they were called. He asked for the incident number. The officer didn't like being steered into details. He leaned closer to the window, lowering his voice as if he wanted to make it personal, then raising it again when he wanted the crowd to hear. He kept glancing at the cameras, then acting like they weren't there. And that's when the mask slipped. Not with a slur, not with something he could deny as a misunderstanding, with a simple insistence that revealed the real belief underneath the pretext, that the man in the driver's seat didn't match the picture in his head of who belonged in a luxury SUV. He made it about ownership instead of evidence. He pushed the idea that the vehicle wasn't really Whitfield's, that something about him didn't add up. He treated the SUV like a prize that needed a rightful owner, and treated Whitfield like a placeholder until proven otherwise. The valet lane tightened. A couple of people who had been casually filming adjusted their posture, not for better video, because they felt the shift from routine to ugly. Even the valet staff, used to dealing with entitled guests and impatient drivers, looked like they'd stepped into something they couldn't unsee. Whitfield didn't flinch. He didn't debate identity. He didn't argue lifestyle. He didn't start explaining his life to earn basic respect. He stayed on the law. He told the officer he was requesting a supervisor and that he would not be searched without a lawful basis. He asked again if he was free to leave. The officer tried to hold the lane hostage. He positioned his body so the SUV couldn't pull out without risking contact. He let the backed-up cars and irritated honks become part of the pressure. He let the delay paint Whitfield as the cause. But cameras don't care who's impatient. They care who's responsible. Whitfield watched the officer's posture, watched the crowd, watched the way the officer's partner, standing near the rear, looked uncertain, shifting weight, scanning phones, aware that the narrative was being captured in real time. Whitfield also knew something else. This kind of encounter could turn dangerous fast if it became a pride contest. So he chose the cleanest exit, not for his ego, for his safety, for the record. He reached slowly, very slowly toward his inner jacket pocket, narrating his movement with calm precision so there could be no, he reached for something later. He pulled out a slim wallet, opened it, and presented an official judicial identification. He didn't thrust it. He didn't flash it like a weapon. He displayed it like a fact. The officer's whole demeanor changed in a single beat. His shoulders loosened, his voice softened. The aggressive certainty melted into a careful politeness that would have been almost comical if it wasn't being captured from 4 angles. He suddenly acted like this was a minor mix-up. He suddenly acted like he had been trying to protect the public. He suddenly acted like he respected the man he had just tried to intimidate. And that flip, clean, instant, undeniable, became the second turning point of the day, because it proved what Whitfield couldn't force anyone to admit with words. The officer's reasonable suspicion was flexible. It wasn't anchored to data. It was anchored to who he thought he was dealing with. The crowd reacted without speaking. You could see it in the way phones held steadier, not lower. In the way people kept recording even after the respectful voice appeared, because they understood the respectful voice was the performance. A patrol supervisor's voice finally cut into the scene as Sergeant Elena Rivera arrived, stepping in with the posture of someone who could feel the disaster before she'd even heard the first sentence. She asked what happened. She asked for verification details. She asked why the stop was initiated here, in a valet lane, with a box in, without a clear confirmation. The officer tried to summarize quickly, carefully now, choosing words that would sound reasonable on playback. He referenced a vague match. He implied he had been following protocol. Rivera looked at the ID, then she looked at the officer. Then she looked at the phones. And she did what supervisors did when they knew the department was about to be judged by the public. She took control. She directed the officer to step back. She spoke to Whitfield with professional respect. She confirmed there would be no search. She began untangling the vehicles so the valet lane could function again. Whitfield stayed composed. He didn't take victory laps. He didn't lecture. He simply recentered the moment where it belonged, in rights, not reactions. Before the SUVs and cruisers separated, he gave one final statement, calm, measured, and clear, that would later become the caption under a dozen viral clips. The idea that constitutional protections didn't shift based on someone's assumptions. Then he drove forward the few feet to the valet stand, exactly where he had intended to stop in the first place. Inside the hotel lobby, Judge Keisha Monroe had seen enough through the glass to know this wasn't a traffic issue. When she stepped out to meet Whitfield, her expression wasn't surprised. It was familiar. And that familiarity, 2 judges, both seasoned, both unshaken, both recognizing the script, was the quiet detail that made what happened next inevitable. Because the footage didn't end when the cruisers moved. That night it found the internet. And the internet did what it always did when it smelled a cover story forming. It started pulling receipts. That night, the valet lane videos didn't spread slowly. They spread like gasoline. One clip showed the box in from the wide angle. 2 patrol cars sealing the SUV in a space that wasn't even a roadway stop. Another clip had clean audio from the valet's phone, catching the officer's stolen vehicle pretext, and the way his focus kept circling back to whether the driver made sense in that car. A third angle, shot through the lobby glass, captured the instant change in the officer's posture after the judicial ID appeared. By midnight, people weren't debating what happened. They were comparing angles. By morning, local attorneys and community advocates were posting side by sides, before the ID, after the ID. The difference was so sharp it became the whole story. Not the SUV, not the hotel, the switch. Then, the pattern work began. Viewers started tagging old posts and filing public records requests. Former complainants recognized the officer's name and badge number. Past stops surfaced with the same familiar structure. An alert claim that never quite became verifiable. An aggressive demand for consent. And a tone that escalated when drivers didn't submit fast enough. News outlets picked it up because it had everything they could verify. Multiple witness videos, a crowded public setting, and a public official who stayed measured the entire time. The department released a short statement that tried to frame it as a routine stop based on a vehicle match. Careful language, minimal detail. But the receipts forced detail. Dispatch logs became a question. If there had been an active stolen vehicle alert, there would be timestamps, confirmations, identifiers. Investigators looked at whether any alert actually existed at that moment, whether the plate had been run before the box-in, and whether the match was the kind that justified an immediate high-risk containment in a valet lane full of pedestrians. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation. The body-worn camera footage became critical, not just for what it showed, but for what it proved about decision-making. Supervisors were asked why a pattern of complaints hadn't triggered earlier intervention. Training records were reviewed, prior stops were audited for the same pretext first, facts later approach. And Judge Whitfield didn't turn it into a speech tour. He did what he'd spent his career watching other people do. He documented preserved evidence and moved it into a legal process that didn't depend on public outrage to stay alive. Within weeks, a civil rights lawsuit followed, focused on unlawful detention tactics, attempted search without proper basis, and discriminatory treatment. The hotel preserved its security footage. Witness statements came in from valets, guests, and conference attendees. The lawsuit didn't need dramatic language. It had something stronger. Consistent video, consistent procedure, and a consistent pattern. The officer was placed under scrutiny, then pulled from street duty. As more reviewed stops came back questionable, the department's posture shifted from denial to damage control. Eventually, the officer was terminated. The city moved towards settlement rather than risk a trial that would put every disputed stop under a courtroom spotlight. The settlement was substantial, and it came with reforms the department couldn't quietly ignore. Revised policies on vehicle alert verification, stricter reporting requirements before containment tactics, clearer supervisor response rules, and department-wide retraining centered on Fourth Amendment limits, bias recognition, and de-escalation in public spaces. For Judge Whitfield, the outcome wasn't about winning an argument. It was about making sure the next person didn't have to survive the same mistaken suspicion to prove they belonged. And for everyone who watched it happen from a hotel sidewalk, or later from a phone screen, the lesson was simple. Calm boundaries plus documentation could beat intimidation, especially when oversight had something real to review. If you ever end up in a situation where someone's authority is pushing past your rights, what would you do? Comply to end it fast, or hold the line and insist on procedure? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more story times where accountability actually catches up.
Ma'am, don't make this harder. Just hand it over.
Sir, I paid for my groceries. You can check the receipt.
We'll see about that.
Hey! Unbelievable.
So imagine this. It's a Wednesday evening, nothing special, nothing dramatic. You've just gotten off work, you're tired, and the only thing on your mind is getting home, changing into something comfortable, and cooking dinner. You run into a grocery store for a quick stop, planning to grab a few ingredients and get out. That's all you want. A normal, quiet, boring shopping trip. But instead, 20 minutes later, you're standing at the front of the store with a circle of strangers staring at you. Your personal bag is dumped out on the floor. Your wallet, your keys, your lip balm, your charger, even a stray receipt you didn't know was in there. Scattered everywhere. And the man who dumped it all, the employee who grabbed your bag without permission, is still pointing at you like you're a criminal. Even though he found absolutely nothing. Not an apple, not a candy bar, nothing. That was Maya Thompson's night. A simple grocery run turned into a viral battle for her dignity. Before we dive deeper, where are y'all watching from? The whole thing started so small. Too small, honestly, for what it turned into. Maya walked into Fairway Market right after work. Still in her scrubs, still wearing her badge. Still with that half-exhausted, half-relieved feeling you get at the end of a long shift. She didn't look suspicious. She didn't act suspicious. She didn't feel suspicious. She just wanted pasta. She grabbed a basket, popped in one earbud, and headed straight for produce. She picked up tomatoes, checked a few for ripeness, put one back because it was squishy, grabbed basil, and kept moving. Normal, uneventful. Except someone else was watching her like she was the main act of a crime documentary. Mr. Callahan. 54. Salt and pepper mustache. Been working there longer than most employees were alive. He had that I can spot trouble from a mile away swagger. The kind that wasn't confidence. It was entitlement. And the moment he saw Maya, he locked onto her like she was already a suspect. He followed her from produce to dry goods to the pasta aisle. Every time she paused, he paused. Every time she put something in her basket, he squinted like he was analyzing evidence. At one point, Maya stepped aside to answer a text from her sister. She slipped her personal bag onto her shoulder while holding her basket in the other hand. That was when Callahan decided he had caught her. By the time she made it to self-checkout, he had built a whole fictional backstory in his head. She was hiding items. She was acting nervous. She was checking her phone too much. She had a bag big enough to hide something in, which, by the way, was just a regular purse. Nothing fancy, nothing oversized, just a bag. Maya scanned everything. She bagged everything. She paid. She took her receipt, and she headed for the exit. 2 steps from the door, 2 steps. Callahan rushed in front of her, blocking the path like a linebacker. "Ma'am," he said loud enough for the people in line to hear, "I'm going to need you to open your bag." Maya blinked. "Sorry, why?" "You didn't scan everything. You put items in your purse." She felt her stomach drop. "I didn't put anything in my purse," she said calmly. Callahan folded his arms. "Ma'am, don't make this harder. Just hand it over." A couple customers turned their heads. Maya clutched her bag strap. "Sir, I paid for my groceries. You can check the receipt." He didn't want the receipt. He grabbed the strap of her bag before she could even react. "Hey!" Maya exclaimed. Callahan yanked it off her shoulder and held it up like a trophy. "If you're innocent, you won't mind," he announced. Then, right there in front of everyone, he flipped Maya's bag upside down and dumped everything on the floor. Keys, wallet, lip balm, earbuds, a hair tie, phone charger. It all scattered across the tile with a loud clatter. A woman at the nearest register gasped. Another person muttered, "What the?" Maya's face burned. And Callahan? He crouched down and sifted through her things with the confidence of someone certain he'd find stolen goods. Except he didn't, because there were none. He stood up slowly, confused. Then, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "She hid it," he said. "She passed it to someone else. I know what I saw." That line, "I know what I saw," would later become infamous. Because the only thing he saw was his own bias. A nearby shopper, Jordan White, pulled out their phone and started recording. Callahan didn't care. "You're not leaving this store," he told Maya, still blocking the exit. "Not until we get to the bottom of this." Maya steadied her voice. "Get the manager." Lena, the teen cashier who had witnessed everything, looked terrified but finally spoke up. I saw her scan everything. Callahan snapped, "Stay out of this." But it was too late. People were watching. And that was the moment. The exact moment. Things shifted. The store manager, Mr. Patel, came hurrying down the front aisle like he'd just heard someone yell, "Clean up in aisle 5." Except this cleanup was about to be a whole PR disaster. He saw Maya's belongings scattered across the floor first. Then he saw Callahan standing in front of her like a nightclub bouncer. "What is happening here?" Patel asked, already sounding overwhelmed. Callahan didn't miss a beat. "She stole items," he barked. "I caught her hiding things in her purse. I emptied it. She's trying to leave. I need you to call the police." The words hit Maya like a punch. She stepped forward. "I didn't steal anything. You can see everything he dumped out of my bag. Nothing from this store is in there." Jordan chimed in, camera still up. "I've been recording since he took her bag. She didn't steal anything. He just dumped her stuff for no reason." Lena, the cashier, lifted her hand halfway like a kid at school. "She scanned everything," she added quietly. "I watched her." Callahan shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. Patel rubbed his forehead. He looked at the bag contents, then at Maya, then at Callahan. "Let's check the cameras," he said finally. Callahan scoffed. "We don't need cameras. I saw her steal." Patel cut him off. "We're checking the cameras." Maya kept her composure, but her breath trembled slightly as she picked up her things from the ground. Jordan moved with her, handing her items carefully, before following her towards the back office, still recording. Patel brought up the footage. They went aisle by aisle, transaction by transaction, and it was all there. Maya picking up items, Maya scanning them, Maya paying, Maya putting groceries into the store-provided bag. Maya's purse never even opening the entire time. There wasn't a single moment, not one, where she did anything even close to suspicious. Patel's face turned pale. Callahan's face turned red. Maya stayed silent. When the footage ended, Jordan whispered, "Wow, just wow." Patel sighed deeply. "Callahan, she didn't take anything." Callahan's jaw clenched. He pointed at the screen like the footage was lying to him. "She must have done something off camera. I know what I saw. These people." He didn't even finish the sentence, because everyone in that room knew where he was going and who he meant by "these people." Jordan caught the entire thing on video. Patel held up a hand. "That's enough. Callahan, step outside." Callahan slammed the office door on the way out. Maya swallowed a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. Patel finally turned to her. I'm truly sorry. This shouldn't have happened." But Maya's eyes said what she couldn't. "An apology doesn't make this disappear." She gathered her things and left. Jordan walked with her out of the store. As soon as they stepped onto the sidewalk, Jordan spoke. "Listen, this is going to sound weird, but would you be okay if I posted the video?" Maya hesitated. She didn't want attention. She didn't want drama, but she did want truth. She wanted accountability. She wanted what happened to be seen, not buried. She nodded. "Post it." And Jordan did. That night, the video hit 200K views, 500K views. By morning, it was everywhere. People were outraged. "Fire him. Callahan needs consequences. Why did he dump her bag like that? This is textbook profiling. Protect Maya." Reporters messaged. Creators stitched the video. The hashtag #shopping while black trended for hours. Maya woke up to a phone full of notifications, messages from coworkers, and about 48 missed calls from unknown numbers. The truth was out. But the fight? The fight was just beginning. By the time Maya got to work the next morning, her phone was blowing up so much she had to silence it. People she hadn't talked to in years were messaging her. "Girl, is this you? Please tell me you're okay. I saw the video. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Her coworkers whispered the moment she walked into the break room. One of them hugged her. Another just shook her head and said, "That man is done." Maya felt a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. Yes, the truth was out there now. But the humiliation, the anger, the memory of her belongings scattered on a dirty grocery store floor, that didn't go away overnight. Around lunchtime, she got a message that made her stop breathing for a second. "Hi, Maya. My name is Sandra Lee. I'm a civil rights attorney. I'd like to speak with you about what happened." Maya stared at the message. She knew that name. Sandra had handled cases involving discrimination, wrongful detention, workplace bias. She was legit. Not one of those, "call me if you slipped in aisle 4" lawyers, she responded. They met that same evening. Sandra didn't waste time. She'd seen Jordan's video. She'd watched it multiple times, and she was fired up. "Maya," she said, leaning forward, "what he did was unlawful. Dumping your purse? That's a violation of your personal property. Blocking your exit? That's unlawful detention. Accusing you publicly without proof? That's defamation. And the racial profiling is obvious." Maya nodded slowly. I don't want drama." Sandra gave a small smile. "Drama already found you. What happens next is about justice." They filed 3 actions. 1, a complaint with the grocery company's corporate office. 2, a civil rights complaint with the state. 3, a lawsuit for damages. Within 48 hours, local news picked up the story. Within 72 hours, national outlets had it. Maya didn't want to be a symbol. She didn't want to be trending. But suddenly people everywhere were talking about her case. Some customers even came forward anonymously saying, "Callahan has done stuff like this before." Oh yes, that was a whole thing. The grocery chain tried to get ahead of the scandal by releasing a PR statement full of corporate buzzwords. "We value our customers. We take this seriously. We're conducting an internal review." But then, the receipts started coming out, literal and metaphorical. During discovery, Sandra obtained employee reports and HR logs. Guess what they showed? Callahan had accused several other customers, mostly black or brown, of stealing in the past. And not once did he have proof. Not once did security footage confirm anything. Not once did corporate discipline him beyond a verbal warning. When Sandra presented that pattern to the court, the judge raised an eyebrow so high it could have jumped off her face. Callahan took the stand looking like he wished he could melt through the floor. He tried to defend himself. "I know what I saw. She was acting suspicious." Sandra questioned him with surgical precision. "Did you see her take anything?" "No." "Did the camera show her taking anything?" "No." "Did her bag contain anything from the store?" "No." "Then on what basis did you publicly accuse her of theft?" He had no answer, just stuttering and anger simmering under the surface. Then came the video. Jordan's footage was played on a large screen in the courtroom. Every second of Callahan grabbing Maya's purse, dumping her belongings, finding nothing, doubling down anyway, saying "people like her" out loud, blocking her from leaving. The judge didn't need hours. She didn't even need half a day. She ruled in Maya's favor on all counts: emotional distress, public humiliation, defamation, unlawful detention, violation of personal property. The grocery company was ordered to pay a settlement. Callahan was officially fired. The kind of fired where they escort you out and disable your badge before you hit the parking lot. And as part of the settlement, the store was required to implement anti-profiling training, a new policy for detaining suspected shoplifters, a mandatory review process before accusing customers publicly. Maya didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just exhaled, feeling lighter for the first time in weeks. But Callahan? Oh, his downfall was only beginning. People dug up everything. Reviews mentioning the rude older guy who follows customers around. Social media posts from former employees saying he treated certain customers differently. Screenshots of shoppers complaining about the man with the mustache who stalks people. Someone even made a compilation of his worst quotes from the viral video. Another person auto-tuned "I Know What I Saw" into a remix. Callahan went from grocery employee to internet villain of the week. But the consequences didn't stop with memes. Remember, Callahan wasn't just an employee. He'd lived in the community for decades. So when everything came out, neighbors who once waved at him suddenly started ignoring and avoiding him. His reputation was flattened. Parents didn't want him volunteering at school events anymore. Local shops refused to rehire him. Even the neighborhood Facebook group banned him after he made a defensive rant about false accusations. The irony, huh? With all the coverage online, every hiring manager who Googled him saw the viral video and dozens of comments saying he always targeted minorities. No one wanted to take that kind of risk. He applied at another grocery chain. Rejected. He applied at a home improvement store. Rejected. Fast food places. Rejected. One manager even told him bluntly, "We can't hire someone who publicly humiliated a customer." The deeper consequences came later. People reported that Callahan became withdrawn, angry, bitter, pacing his apartment late at night, always muttering that he didn't deserve this. But here's the twist. He still didn't believe he was wrong. He told anyone who would listen that Maya had gotten away with something, even when the court ruled against him. He clung to his own imagination instead of the truth, and that stubborn refusal to face reality is what ruined his life more than anything else. For weeks, Maya had been carrying around this invisible weight, the humiliation, the anger, the shock of being treated like a criminal for simply shopping. Even after winning the lawsuit, the viral attention, the apology emails, and the massive online support, her body still remembered everything. Healing is an instant, but slowly, quietly, life started to shift back into place. One evening, Maya sat at her parents' house, sipping tea at the kitchen table. Her mom slid a hand across the table and squeezed hers gently. "You know," her mom said softly, "I've had similar things happen to me. I just never told you." Maya looked up surprised. Her mom nodded. "Different decade, same assumptions." A pause. "But I'm proud of you. You didn't let them walk over you." For the first time since the incident, Maya let herself cry. Not out of sadness, but out of release. Eventually, life settled into a new rhythm. She wasn't that woman in the video anymore. She was Maya, sister, daughter, coworker, friend. What happened didn't define her, but it did shape her. She was stronger now, more sure of herself, less willing to shrink for anyone. And she promised herself this: if she ever saw someone else going through what she went through, she wouldn't hesitate to step in, just like Jordan did for her. Because sometimes justice starts with a single person hitting record. The main lesson from Maya's case is clear. She was accused because of racial bias, not because of anything she actually did. Nothing in her behavior suggested theft. The only thing that made her a suspect in Callahan's mind was the fact that she was a black woman shopping alone. The only reason the situation escalated is because Callahan made assumptions tied directly to her race. But everyone deserves equal treatment, and no one should be accused or singled out because of the color of their skin.
Oh, don't put your stuff there yet!
Sir, my items aren't near yours. Sir, step back. Give her space.
I didn't threaten to hit her!
God bless you, sir.
A white man had a meltdown at a local Fresh Mart outside St. Louis, got up in a black woman's face at self-checkout, and it went viral fast. People didn't share it because it was entertaining. They shared it because it was familiar. One of those moments where someone decided the public space belonged to them, and they expected everyone else to shrink. And in the clip, you could see the exact second it stopped being a checkout dispute and started being about intimidation. Now, before the details, tell me where you're watching from, your city, state, or country. And if you're here for real story times where people keep their dignity and accountability follows, hit like and subscribe. Because the only reason situations like this change is when people stop letting them disappear. Here's what actually happened, in order. It was a typical busy evening in Fresh Mart's self-checkout. The lighting was harsh, the machines were beeping, and everyone moved like they were trying to get out of there without any extra problems. One clerk oversaw multiple kiosks, which meant customers were mostly left to manage themselves, unless something broke or someone got loud. Janelle Rivers walked into that store like thousands of people do every day. Quick trip, basic items, head down, no interest in conflict. She wasn't scanning the room for trouble. She was thinking about dinner the next day and getting home. Keith Mallory was already at a kiosk when she got there. White guy, Cardinals cap. The kind of posture that took up a little extra space on purpose. His transaction finished before hers even started. That part mattered, because the whole argument later tried to pretend the opposite. Keith stayed in the lane. He didn't step over to the side, bagging shelf the way stores expect. He kept bagging right in the station's working area. Slow, deliberate movements, retying bags, rearranging items, sliding things around like he had all night and everyone behind him could wait. That alone wasn't a crime, it was just inconsiderate. The problem was the way he reacted when someone treated the station like it was open, because it was. Janelle stepped up to the kiosk and began placing her items down to start scanning. She didn't touch his cart. She didn't bump him. She didn't shove past him. She simply did what any customer would do when a machine looked available. Keith turned like she'd challenged him. He snapped at her immediately, sharp voice, hard stare, and positioned his body so the space became tighter. He acted like she had disrespected him by moving forward, even though his transaction was already done. And he didn't just complain quietly. He made sure other people could hear, because volume is a tool when you're trying to control a situation. Janelle didn't match the volume. She didn't throw insults. She didn't step into his space. She stayed steady and pointed out the basic reality. He was finished paying, and she was trying to start. Keith rejected that reality and replaced it with his own. He framed it like she was rushing him, cutting him, trying to push him out. He treated a normal checkout moment like it was a personal attack. That's when the clerk, Mia Patel, noticed. Mia had been doing the usual self-checkout sprint, fixing scanner errors, helping with age checks, answering questions people should have asked before they walked in. But Keith's tone wasn't normal frustration. It had that edge that makes employees instantly alert, because it can go from words to danger in a blink. Mia walked over and tried to redirect the moment back into something manageable. She reminded Keith the station needed to keep moving, and asked him to finish bagging at the side shelf. Keith didn't respond like someone being offered a solution. He responded like someone being corrected in public. He raised his voice more, he talked over her, and then he did something that, in hindsight, told everyone exactly where his head was. He started insisting he hadn't threatened Janelle, before anyone had even formally accused him of that. He said it like he was planting a flag, like he was writing his defense in real time. But at the same time, he kept crowding. Janelle asked for space. She didn't dramatize it, she didn't beg. She stated it like a boundary that mattered. Keith moved closer anyway. That's how power works in small public conflicts. One person tries to shrink the other without leaving bruises. It's proximity, posture, tone, and pressure, forcing the other person to either retreat or react. And if the other person reacts, the aggressor gets to point and say, "See, that's the problem right there." Janelle didn't react the way he wanted. She stayed controlled. She held her items close, not because she was being petty, but because she clocked what he was doing. She kept her body angled away, enough to avoid contact, but firm enough not to be pushed backward. She focused on the checkout task, refusing to let him turn it into a personal back and forth. That refusal irritated him more. Now the people around them started noticing. You could always tell when a grocery store scene crossed the line from awkward to alarming. Beeps stopped. Carts paused mid-push. Heads turned without fully turning. A couple people gave that quick look toward the front, like they were calculating whether staff would step in or whether they should. And one bystander, Tomas Jenkins, made the decision that changed everything. He pulled out his phone and started recording, not with big gestures, not with commentary, just a steady lens pointed toward the self-checkouts, capturing what the store cameras would capture too. Keith's receipt already printed, Keith still blocking, Janelle trying to check out, Mia trying to de-escalate, and the way Keith kept leaning in while insisting he wasn't doing anything. Keith noticed the phone almost instantly, and instead of calming down, he got performative. He leaned into the idea that he was being accused unfairly. He repeated his denial louder. He tried to make it look like he was the one under attack, like the crowd and the clerk and the woman beside him were ganging up on him for no reason. That's another control tactic. Turn the lens into proof of your victimhood while continuing the behavior the lens is recording. Mia's posture changed. You could tell she'd shifted from customer service to safety mode. Her hands stayed visible. She stopped trying to win an argument and started trying to prevent a moment she wouldn't be able to undo. Janelle kept her voice level. She didn't escalate. She didn't insult him. She didn't step forward. She just repeated the boundary and tried to continue scanning. Keith still wouldn't move. He stayed planted, making her check out physically difficult, and he kept talking over both women, as if his voice could dominate the space and force compliance. He was acting like the store's rules didn't apply to him, as long as he refused to acknowledge them. Then the tension sharpened again. Keith's arm shifted toward Janelle's items on the counter. It wasn't a casual gesture. It had purpose. Janelle tightened her grip on what she was holding. Mia's eyes flicked down toward the counter, then back up to Keith's face. And that's when the call went out. Someone, either Mia or another employee, alerted security to self-checkout. The radio crackle wasn't loud, but it landed like a warning. The store had recognized this as more than a customer being upset. It was now a situation with a timeline, witnesses, and cameras, internal and external. Keith didn't seem to realize what that meant yet. Or maybe he did, and he decided to push harder before anyone could stop him. Because right as the bystander's phone stayed steady, right as Mia held her ground, right as Janelle tried to finish the simple act of paying for groceries, Keith moved like he was about to take control of the counter with his hands. Keith didn't calm down. He escalated. What had started as him refusing to clear the bagging space turned into him treating Janelle like she wasn't allowed to stand where she was standing. His voice stayed high, his posture stayed squared, and he kept repeating the same point, that he hadn't threatened her, like saying it enough times would make everyone ignore what his body was doing in real time. Janelle stayed measured. She didn't trade insults. She didn't step into him. She kept her items close and kept her words short, focused on one thing. She needed him out of her space so she could check out and leave. She said it plainly. Back up. Give space. Let her finish. Keith didn't respect that boundary. In the tight self-checkout lane, he made himself bigger, leaning in, closing distance, forcing the moment to feel personal instead of procedural. And that's when the situation stopped looking like two customers annoyed and started looking like intimidation. Then he crossed into physical behavior. He knocked or shoved some of Janelle's groceries out of the way on the counter, treating her items like obstacles instead of property. And he made quick, aggressive motions toward her that looked like he was trying to scare her into backing off. The exact thing people always argue about later, whether it counts as a swing or not, didn't matter in that moment, because the intent was obvious to the people standing there. It was threatening, it was close, and it was the kind of movement that makes a public space go silent. That silence happened. The beeps from nearby kiosks continued, but fewer people were scanning. Carts stopped rolling, heads turned fully now, not just side-eye. And the phones that were already up stayed up, because once groceries get shoved and arms start snapping towards someone, witnesses don't assume it'll work itself out. Mia, the clerk, tried to intervene again, but there was only so much she could do without putting herself in danger. She wasn't security. She was an employee stuck in the middle of a customer who wanted control and another customer who just wanted to be safe. Security arrived at the point when it mattered most. Darnell stepped in quickly and did the main thing that changes outcomes. He separated them. He put his body between Keith and Janelle, created space, and directed Keith away from her and away from the kiosk area. He didn't turn it into a shouting match. He treated it like a safety problem, because that's what it was. Keith tried to keep arguing, still denying, still blaming, still trying to make it sound like the whole thing was overreacting. But once security was between them, he lost the one tool he'd been using to control Janelle: proximity. He couldn't crowd her anymore. He couldn't loom over the counter. He couldn't force her to choose between backing up or getting bumped. Janelle stayed composed through the separation. She didn't suddenly become loud because the crowd was watching. She didn't perform. She stated the boundary one more time, simple and clear, that he didn't get to put his hands on her or touch her groceries because he was angry. That's what stuck. Because it wasn't a catchy line. It was the truth of the whole moment. With Keith moved back and security holding the space, the store shifted into procedure. The clerk focused on documenting the incident. Janelle focused on collecting her items and finishing her checkout. Keith kept trying to talk his way into being the victim, but the people around him had already seen enough to understand what actually happened. And by the time the confrontation ended inside Fresh Mart, the story was already leaving the building because the recording didn't stop when security stepped in. The recording was the reason the pressure didn't disappear. The clip didn't spread slowly, it popped. Within hours, people online were tagging Fresh Mart and asking the same question in different ways. What was the store going to do about a customer getting in a woman's face at self-checkout, knocking her groceries around, and needing security to step in? And the reason it moved so fast was simple. The video didn't look complicated. It looked like escalation. It looked like intimidation. It looked like someone trying to bully a black woman in public and assuming nobody would stop it. Multiple angles started circulating, not just one. That's when the narrative battle started. Keith began framing it online as a line issue, saying he was being rushed and disrespected, implying that Janelle had cut him. He leaned hard on technical language, claiming he never threatened her, because it sounded cleaner than addressing what people actually saw. Him taking up space, getting loud, then turning physical with her groceries. Janelle didn't do a back and forth. She posted a short, measured statement and kept it factual. She explained that his payment was already complete when she stepped up. She described the escalation: cursing, crowding, knocking items. Then pointed out the key reason the video mattered, because it showed why she didn't feel safe and why security had to intervene. No insults, no name-calling, just a timeline. And while the internet argued, Fresh Mart did what it always does when a video forces its hand. It went to the systems. They pulled the self-checkout logs tied to the station. Those logs don't care who's louder. They show when the payment was approved, when the receipt printed, and when the transaction ended. They also pulled overhead footage and the self-checkout camera feed to match what customers were posting with what the store had on record. That internal review was the quiet part people don't see. But it's where accountability either happens or gets buried. Fresh Mart's first public response was careful and generic. The standard corporate language about being aware of the incident and reviewing. But behind the scenes, they were building a timeline: transaction complete, lingering at the station, escalation, security call, separation. That timeline turned it from drama online into an incident the company could act on without guessing. And once the review confirmed what the footage and logs showed, Fresh Mart shifted from cautious to decisive. They issued a formal ban trespass notice against Keith. They followed up their initial statement with clearer language about customer safety and behavior expectations in the store. Not just, "we're looking into it," but We addressed it. At the same time, Janelle took the real-world route, not just the internet route. She filed the store incident report and followed up with a police report, because when someone's behavior crosses into physical intimidation, the record matters. It creates consequences that don't depend on a trending hashtag. Then Keith faced the part that hits hardest in modern situations like this: identification. Once people recognized him and connected a name, calls and messages started reaching the places he couldn't control. In his workplace, community circles, people who knew him in real life. And suddenly the story wasn't something he could explain away as a misunderstanding, because the evidence didn't leave room for that. Once the video spread and Freshmart reviewed what happened, the store moved from looking into it to action. Keith was formally banned from returning, and Freshmart put out a clearer statement focused on customer safety. Janelle followed through the normal way: incident report with the store and a police report, keeping it factual and consistent. And outside the store, Keith faced the kind of consequence cameras create now. Once he was identified, the incident followed him into real life. People contacted his workplace and community circles, and his denial didn't land the same when the footage and store timeline were already out there. On Freshmart's side, the main change was practical. Self-checkout staff were pushed to call security sooner when someone starts crowding, blocking, or escalating, so bagging after payment doesn't turn into another safety issue. After Freshmart issued the ban and confirmed the review, the story stopped being a viral moment and became an example. People kept sharing it for one reason: it showed how fast entitlement can turn into intimidation, especially when someone assumes a black woman will back up just to keep the peace. Janelle didn't spend weeks arguing online. She stayed consistent. She documented what happened, followed the process, and let the evidence speak. That steadiness mattered because it kept the focus on behavior and accountability, not internet drama. Keith tried to minimize it, but the combination of phone footage, witnesses, and the store's own logs made that hard. That's the modern shift. When a timeline exists, denial doesn't have much room to breathe. Freshmart also had to absorb the lesson publicly. They tightened self-checkout expectations, reinforced early security involvement, and made it clear, at least in policy and action, that customer safety comes before protecting an aggressive customer's ego. And the takeaway was simple. In public spaces, the power move is often trying to control the narrative first. Janelle didn't let that happen. She stayed calm, held her boundary, and relied on what actually works: witnesses, documentation, and follow-through. So, here's the question. If you were standing nearby, would you have recorded, gotten staff, or kept your head down and kept scanning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that boundaries matter. And subscribe for more real story times like this, where dignity holds and accountability shows up.